And welcome to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Jen, I'm here.
Yep.
Good morning or afternoon, as the case may be.
Good afternoon.
Who are we missing?
Bruce, I think, is not on yet.
Okay, Michaela's on. All right,
Michaela's here.
Yeah, we have a quorum. So I'll call the meeting to order and let's approve the minutes from Liz from the meeting of January 11. Do we have a motion?
Move to accept.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Jan. All those in favor, we have to go around the room.
Hi, Michaela.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Jan.
And it's Karen. Okay. All right, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jan, who's going to manage our discussion of the housing production plan. Jan, were you able to pick up the copies?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. So Jackie has hers?
Yes, she does.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go.
Okay, so if we're going to do the housing production plan first, is that what you're suggesting, Ren?
I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. Yes, I'm transferring the meeting to you to conduct the review of the housing production plan. We're going to skip items 3 through 6 on our agenda. And if we have time after the end, we will cover as many of those items as we have time to do.
Okay, so I would like to share a screen. I have a few slides to lead us through the discussion, and maybe we could do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's see. We get security. Share screen. All right.
So let me just take a second to get on our meeting site.
Recording in progress.
Okay, now share the screen. I am,
And mute your microphone.
mute the microphone.
Yeah, the microphone has to be off. There we go.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. I'm not seeing where I can share my screen. There it is.
Be able to see your screen up on.
We're trying.
Yeah,
trying.
she's sharing it.
If I can get it up there, yes. We all need to see it.
There we go.
Okay.
That's the presentation, not the plan. But is that what you want?
Yeah, that's what I want. So if we can get, and I have a couple of hard copies. I have.
Can we maybe,
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I have it.
Okay, I have a couple of hard copies.
you want?
I thought what we might do is, since there are a number of us in the room who have not been through all of this, we've not been through all of the housing production plan process that we've been through over the last several months, to just run through what are the main features of the housing production plan, what we've gone through already, and where we are in that process. So first of all, The parts of the housing production plan include a housing needs assessment, which we did last spring and into the summer. It also included, we had in July, a community housing workshop, had a housing survey that we did for the entire community, and we have reports on that. I have a very brief set of conclusions coming out of that, because I know everybody on the trust has already gone through all of that, but I thought it might be helpful for those of you in the room who haven't. And then look at the challenges to development of housing, and then what the annual housing production goals are, and what some of the housing strategies are as we go through that. So the housing needs assessment basically looks at all of the housing situation in Stockbridge and the population, and kind of comes to some conclusions about the state of housing in the Stockbridge area. So in 2021, we had 1,638 homes in Stockbridge. 80% of them were built before 1980. And as we've heard elsewhere, probably over half of them were built before 1950. So we have about 811 full-time residents that are living in those homes, which are about 50% of the housing inventory. The majority of the other houses are for part-time residents, second homeowners.
Those are residential homes, not people.
Yeah, residential homes.
Yeah.
We also have in town 113 affordable residences, all rental. And as you are probably aware, they're at Pine Woods, at Peton Court, and at Riverbrook. We only have 40 units in housing that have been added over the past decade.
That's Riverbrook.
That's for the entire town.
No, but that's Riverbrook. Those.
The resident population over the past 20 years has declined 15%. But in the last decade, the median age, excuse me, no problem. The median age has gone from 41 to 60. We have fewer people in all age groups, except for the in the age group 65 and older. We have a decline in the student population over the last decade of 29%. And we have a decrease in the household median income from 55,000 to 46.5 thousand. We also know that housing costs are becoming more difficult for many residences. The 2022 median price, and this is a small group because there weren't a lot of sales, but it's representative. And if you look at the assessed value, it's also in line with this, that the single family residence median price was $575,000, which on that median income for residents in town would not be affordable for most of those people. We also know, according to some of the information that Karen has been able to collect, that 1 in 3 residents spend over 30% of their income on housing, and 1 in 5 spend over 50% of their income on housing. So that gives you a pretty simple look at what the situation is in Stockbridge at the moment.
There's one other statistic I would like to add. In the United States, there's 1.05 births for every death. In Stockbridge, there's 3 deaths for every birth. That's kind of the challenge that we're trying to address here is, how we kind of keep the next generation of folks in the town so we have a town. It's a 10 or 20 year view. It's not a 1 year view. Yes.
Patrick, do you know the percentages for Berkshire County as a whole?
It's less. I think Alfred and Stockbridge or Monterey and Stockbridge are the 2 oldest communities in the county. And it has to do with the higher the average price of the home, the more likely that it's retirees or, folks who maybe have, been in a long time because they inherited it. So.
Is it fair to conclude then that there's a relationship between the rising cost of housing and those changes in the demographics? Does it follow that we've lost people, middle income, middle-aged people, older people that tend to be wealthier can be here, but because of a shortage of houses that middle-class people could afford, we're seeing the population shift pretty dramatically over the course of 10 years. And that's, I just want to be clear that that's what's going on.
Yeah, it's not just a Stockbridge issue, it's happening, in areas across the state.
Actually, across the country.
Across the country.
Across the country in pockets, yeah.
So as I mentioned, we had a community housing workshop and also the survey. There was a lot of information we collected on that. I think there are some documents in the background of our trust meetings, if you want to go back and look at those. Or they're also attached, some of the findings in the draft housing production plan, which after today's meeting, we're going to make more generally available. But the community housing workshop, I think there were a couple of really significant takeaways that I wanted to just mention today. There was a general consensus to focus on young adults and young families and those with fixed income when you're looking at what the housing needs are for the community. And to pursue some cluster homes, ADUs, multifamily homes, or what we're referring to as sweat equity opportunities. So, for those who have the skills to be able to develop some of the equity in a home by working on it themselves. Also to develop existing and/or town-owned property, but preserve open space in doing that. So the challenges to development of housing are quite a few, but they're also, I want to say not significant in some ways, because it depends a lot on the location of where one might try to develop, how significant some of these would be. So the first one is zoning, which is probably true in just about every town in the state, that there are some zoning issues that create obstacles for building housing. And there are a few, I don't think it's widespread, but there are a few that might be helpful to modify slightly in order to allow some housing to be developed. And we can talk about that. I think it's more relevant when we actually get to a point of where we might want to do a development and what are the zoning issues that are relevant at that point. The water and sewer service, as you know, we're probably about 60% of the homes are covered by water and sewer. So, and not all of them necessarily, at the capacity you'd want to be adding housing in that area. So it depends a lot on, where we might want to develop some housing, whether that would be an issue or not. Again, endangered species, we have some in the immediate area, as you all know, that are, we would want to take into account all of that, depending on the location of where that might be. We also have issues in terms of the age of housing stock, and this would be not only for preservation of existing houses, but also if you wanted to think about moving a house from a single residence to a multifamily residence. The conversion of that may be more challenging because of the age of the housing stock. Of course, another challenge is availability of financing, which
And down payment.
and down payments. Transportation, which again could be location dependent on where it is that you want to be. And then community perceptions of building. So I know this is hard to see, so I'll try to walk through it with you. I think one of the things that's important, and there are many, if I might just say, in the draft that we've circulated to the trust, which was written by Karen Thank you very much. It has a number of things in it that I think we have not had a discussion among the trust about. And so we really should try to touch on those to see if there is agreement about how to proceed or not how to proceed. And some of that, I think, is outlined right here on the housing strategies of the things that we and/or the planning board and the select board and the community preservation board might want to be looking at over the next 5 years, because the housing production plan would really go over a 5-year period. So the first one would be these are capacity building strategies. And the first one would be to conduct ongoing community outreach and evaluation.
Education.
And education. And as I said at the beginning, after we have a discussion about the housing production plan, are you missing? Oh, I think it's on the back, maybe? Yeah, on the back. Sorry, Pat, somewhere in there. You're looking at that.
Yeah.
Okay. So after we have a discussion here, we're going to be having a discussion in another community housing workshop where we would talk through the plan and really get input from the entire community before we finalize anything. In addition to that, we would be also presenting it to the planning board, getting their feedback, integrating that into the process, and also to the select board, getting a discussion around that, incorporating their input, because ultimately, once we've resolved a housing production plan, we would take it to both the planning board and to the select board for approval.
And this is on capitalized, you're on number 2?
Yes.
Like, I think that there's a lot of different ways to fund housing. I would suggest that, that we include in that we wrote a residential inclusionary bylaw last year, which specifically links a payment to the trust for building housing to luxury developments at scale, at parcels like who might be doing 40, 50, 60 units. If we get any of those, they pay a fee into this. When you start talking about community preservation and the select board, that's really property taxpayers like us. And frankly, I don't want to fund housing from property taxes. I want to fund housing from tourists. We will propose a 3% ticket tax for nonprofits. We'll see if we get through the legislature. We might as well try. I want tourists to pay for what we need to repair our houses and to build new houses. I don't want it to go on the property tax rolls. So I would, if we're going to put that in there, I would just like to encourage creative thinking on, we already got one of them through the inclusionary bylaw. And I think a nonprofit, a event ticket tax is a nice logical way to fund things at scale that we need at this town.
Mm-hmm. It's a good idea.
Patrick, is that like tickets to Namkeg and tickets to Rockwell?
Every single thing.
All the, and what about the theaters in the Tanglewood?
Stockbridge sells 1 million of those tickets a year, 1 million. When you go and buy a James Taylor ticket, they add $22 as the ticket processing fee now. All right, if they're going to complain about us adding a $3 or $4 ticket for Stockbridge, so that people can repair their porch or paint their house or build a new little house for someone who wants to downsize, I'll take that fight on every day.
That's a great idea. It really is. I mean, like.
I know. So anyway, I'm just saying,
Well, but Patrick, how do we do that?
How about we should have a session just on that. I've been working on it for a year and I'm still working on it. I'd be happy to brief you, but I don't think now's the time to do a deep dive in it.
I'll add it.
No,
Yeah.
that's a very creative idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
New York City does it.
Heck, the
Anyway,
vineyard,
none of these ideas are original.
the vineyard gets, as part of the ticket prices for the Steamship Authority.
Yeah.
Okay. We also need to be securing other financial resources and I think we have a number of things underway right now to do that, as Patrick mentioned. the zoning strategies, we want to pursue adopting the zoning for the ADUs, but as many of you probably know, the governor has proposed some changes, and we're going to wait and see. That would basically allow ADUs by right, and then we and the select board, or the planning board, would want to look at what effect that has on Stockbridge, and if we think there should be modifications to that. But that's another avenue to go down. Identify modest opportunities for a wider range of housing choices in specific areas. And these are under zoning strategies.
What does that mean exactly?
Pardon?
What does that mean in English?
What that means is, if you look at, there are a lot of zoning rules that affect how one could change the housing internally. So it depends on what you want to, so I don't think we're talking at all about,
Second egress, you're talking about like adding another door, those sorts of things.
we're not talking about changing the overall landscape and zoning at all. I don't.
A lot of that is
Did
building
get-
code though.
In the
Yeah.
survey, in the workshop, there was a lot of interest in having more diverse housing types being allowed in the community. So it's, I think, what we're suggesting is in appropriate areas to look at maybe
Sure.
some dimensional changes and some use changes in order to allow different, more diverse and affordable options to be developed.
And are we going to articulate those?
When we have a concrete plan.
Okay, good.
I mean, I think, right, and I'll give you another example there. I think, and Karen, you pointed this out, there are, if you want to do like a cluster house, there are some zoning restrictions that make it so it's impossible to do that without a huge.
Yeah, we do have a cluster bylaw in the books. The thing I'm most interested in changing is what I call that flex parcel proposal, which is
Yep.
if you're willing to do a smaller house, you could, rather than a McMansion, you could
Yeah.
do two houses that are attached and have a rental in one and own the other. And that lets people with a much lower income afford to buy a house around here. If if the only thing you do is build a 5,000 square foot McMansion for the cost of the property, the cost of the land, how about we let them build two $2,500 houses together, rent one out, and all of a sudden, rather than needing 400,000 in income, you only need 100,000 income. That's a way to get families in here because the rental income next door pays for it.
Yeah, and we added that as part of the, to this particular strategy. And where we did add models on what's being done other places too
Okay.
throughout the draft.
Patrick, that doesn't bypass the 1, 2, and 4 acre.
No, but right now our zoning, if you want to do a two-family in R4, you need to have 6 acres.
Yeah.
Right.
So in other words, you can't build two little houses next to each other, one for a rental and one to live in, without having an extra 2 acres. Why is that? If environmentally we care about footprint, we care about what size the house is overall, not like, it's just we got weird little flukes in our zoning,
Yeah.
3-family need 8 acres in R4 instead of 4 acres. Just saying.
Yeah, well,
These are easy. And I don't think we have to wait till year 3 to 5 on that. These are easy changes.
Right. As a result of this plan, this group is then saying we need to go to work and make some changes to our zoning.
yeah, it's pretty unrealistic to have 6 acres to do a 2-family situation, 6 acre. The price of that just makes the whole idea unworkable for a lot of people.
Yeah, I should mention that the state has required categories of strategies that have to be addressed in these plans. And one really is, 2 are kind of related to zoning, but one very specific on zoning. So we cannot ignore it.
But just to be clear, at least my personal position, if we go to 2 acre, but 2-family by right, I want a limit on the size. I do not want to squish 2 McMansions into the space that you can only squish 1 McMansion in now. I want people to build 2 smaller homes, so that we're not just doubling our density here with a rule like that. We're basically giving them a trade-off. You're right, you don't have to build 2 homes, but if you want to build 2, you build them smaller. People don't need, well, whatever, I don't want to make judgments.
Yeah.
I just think we have an inherent conflict of values here where people want the open space and the big lots as they drive around, and that's their sense of how they want the place to look and feel. But that works against the idea of trying to create housing that's
Right.
affordable to the target population that we're looking for.
That's right.
And at some point, we have to decide. I almost feel like people in their conscience know that we need more affordable housing.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to where the rubber meets the road, they really don't want to face up to what's involved to do it.
Well, I think there's also some sense that if you change some of the zoning rules, it will add a lot more housing, and take away the open space. So being kind of selective about which zoning things you want to change so that it really benefits the housing as much as possible without changing the character of the town.
But we can't do spot zoning and say, oh, here's a good project, so we'll manipulate the zoning.
You
for
do
this.
40B though.
No, but-
First, you know, for
What we
the,
can also do is we can also do overlay districts. We don't have to change the zoning town-wide to create another Sergeant Street or another Park Street or another Church Street. We have a lot of streets that have many houses on them that create little nice neighborhoods. We could add a street or two to that overlay and say, yeah, we're going to encourage a little bit of density there without basically blowing up the fact that we're a rural town and turn it into West Springfield. I mean, there's ways that we can kind of approach this that's maybe a little more creative than just, it's all in one or all in the other,
Exactly.
I like Sergeant Street. I don't mind in one more or two more,
So I think what we're talking about here is identifying specific things.
Yes.
That won't change the overall character, but will allow for some more housing in certain places,
That's right.
in certain areas. Okay.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Is that okay? So, I'm just looking at the time frame for implementation for zoning strategies. So number 3 is promote multifamily and mixed-use development in and near the downtown, which is years 3 through 5. Zoning, adopt zoning for ADUs, and ADUs, just for those of us who don't know what an ADU is, an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if the town is really looking at a plan to increase affordable housing, why wouldn't it be more aggressive in terms of looking at downtown? There's a 3 to 5 year time frame here. Why wouldn't the approach be, let's really try to encourage development where you're close to town, there's a bus along the way, you have sidewalks, that kind of thing. Why isn't, or would the town consider looking at that faster than some of the other proposals that are being identified here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're the town, so I think that it's not, I think that's a great idea to do as fast as we can. I came in thinking that things would happen faster than they take. If we start right now on the 2-family idea that I just laid out, probably won't maybe we could make this town meeting, probably we wouldn't. So that means next town meeting, which is in 2025, if we pass a bylaw then, it takes the Attorney General 6 months to implement it, to get it on our books. So that means the end of 2025 before it's even on the books, and that's before you start building. Town stuff, government just takes longer because there's a lot of regulations and parties that have to approve it, and hell, it has to go through legal. And that's why it's so important to starting this stuff now, because the lead time out to implement any of these ideas might be 2 or 3 years, just getting started now. But we have some proposals on the table, and we're a bunch of volunteers that could use as much help as we can get. So if any of these ideas resonate, let's talk.
And with respect to number 1, adopt zoning for accessory dwelling units, what assessment has been done to make the determination that an accessory dwelling unit actually would be beneficial with respect to providing affordable?
We had a fairly big debate on this last year. I mean, I say last year, because it was proposed. I'm using the passive voice. I proposed an ADU bylaw that would apply to residents. It was a little controversial because there's sort of a feeling that, that maybe not everybody agrees that we should do things just that if you live here. It didn't advance. But this year, the governor has proposed that the ADUs are by right for every single family home. It's in the housing bond bill, and the people in the know tell me it's likely to pass. So we felt we would kind of wait to see what happens there. I think to your point, it's not necessarily a good thing that you put an ADU on every property, because if you live over by Goodrich Street, for example, where 5 of the 10 houses are now Airbnbs, boy, you have 2 rentals on a property, and that property is worth a whole lot more than if you have 1 rental on a property. It's something I'm at least worried about. But if the governor says it's by right, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do other than go into the short-term rental bylaw and make it maybe tougher to do that. So
But there's no requirement that it be affordable.
there's no requirement that it be affordable, no. Yeah.
But they tend to be, based on market, they tend to be more affordable in the private market than most rentals because they're smaller and they're owner-occupied properties. And I got to say, in looking at ADU by right bylaws in other communities, there is not ever a giant wave of these coming in for applications. I mean, larger towns by right, they're lucky to get a handful of ADUs in any particular year. So we're talking about kind of a niche type of development, but still some things, units can be meaningful to not only people who are going to be renting them, but the owners too, because they provide some income.
Yeah.
The other side of that is when we look at the median income for people who are full-time residents here, there are a lot of people who it's not clear where they would get the money to build an ADU or to in the first place.
And I also would point out that in Boston now, 1 out of 5 houses are being bought by these giant real estate trusts that then turn them into rental units. Yeah. Las Vegas, 1 out of 3. You've got a giant trend toward people buying up property en masse and turning into rentals. And sophisticated buyers like that, these big giant billion-dollar funds who are going to come in, are going to have some economics, guy saying, how do we maximize revenue? How do we maximize income from this property? And the ADU is an easy way to do it when in the summer people are getting $500 a day on Airbnb. You can't, we can't rely necessarily on the way it's been because of how these vast changes in the real estate market that are going on right now. It's all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we also.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Jan, I just wanted to ask Patrick, do we have any indication of what the ADU bill that the House is, or the state is considered, the Commonwealth is considering? What kind of restrictions from size or any kind of restrictions at all that the bill has?
I think it was less than 900 square feet, wasn't it?
Right around that.
Yeah, it's probably related to, the state has a model bylaw for ADU, so it'd probably be pretty close to what's in that.
Okay. And, okay. Thank you.
Which is still large enough for a short-term rental.
That's bigger than mine.
Yeah. Okay. We also want to look at promoting multifamily and mixed-use development in or near downtown. And this is one of the things that came out of the community workshop, to be looking at doing that. And it is kind of in line with what Patrick was saying about overlay districts and maybe having, one.
And this one's as easy as look at the current zoning map, where it's like residential, commercial on one side of the street and residential on the other side of the street. Based on how people kind of, what has happened since Riggs bought up a lot of downtown and whatever, it'd be pretty easy to just look at the map and say, yeah, maybe we should just jigger it a little bit and make this area a little bit more flexible. If somebody wanted to run, a doctor's practice on the first floor and live in the second floor, maybe we just make it a little bit more flexible. And we just haven't updated that map in 30 years, 40 years. And the downtown's changed a lot. So that's where that one's coming.
Then we turn to development and preservation strategies. There are really 3 that we're thinking about. One is to partner with some developers on privately owned property. And to be very blunt, we don't have any such plans right now, but I think it would be good to look at, see if there is a situation where we could work with a developer to,
Yeah.
on private owned.
If someone
privately
comes
owned
in with a
property.
project that makes sense, how can you kind of work with them to make sure that it actually happens
Yeah.
and includes some amount of affordable units?
We would also be looking to make public property that we might have, which would include any donated property to the town or to the trust, but looking at public property and whether we could develop that for affordable housing over the next 5 years. And thirdly, we want to be, because of the age of various houses and in town, we want to be looking at housing preservation initiatives. So is there a program that we could do that would provide funding or low-cost loans to residents to do some of the upgrades and improvements in their house, particularly for climate and so on, where you might want to be taking out lead, you might want to be doing better insulation, and there are state programs that provide funding for that. But as Patrick would tell you, there are some limitations to that, depending on things like some problems in existing housing that the state grants won't come in and do unless they're remedied. So we want to be looking at how to bring forward programs that would allow those changes to take place, those improvements.
And we actually mentioned going back and applying for CDBG money for a housing rehab program. Yes, and I'll update the plan to mention the progress that's been made on that with Bailey Boyd Associates.
And we also had a conversation with Berkshire Regional Planning last week, specifically around impediment removal. They've got impediments are like when if you have, asbestos in your house, then they won't come in and insulate your roof. If you have vermiculite, I don't even know what that is, something called vermiculite in your house, they won't do it. If you have a whole bunch of boxes because, maybe you've hoarded everything you've ever owned in your life, they won't come in and insulate because they can't get to the walls. There's actually money in separate funds to take care of that, but you have to kind of know how to get to it. Anyways, they're coming up with a fund for Pittsfield, North Adams, and, Stockbridge is, believe it or not, the only town beside North Adams, Pittsfield, and a small part of Adams that qualifies as Justice 40, which is this Biden administration thing for underserved and underprivileged communities. Everyone thinks Stockbridge is, so wealthy, and frankly, as the census demographics of the town are actually very modest in terms of what our median income is and what the age is of our population. So specifically around energy and the elderly, we actually qualify for certain types of support that other communities don't. And Berkshire Regional Planning is going to use that to try to get us into this program with North Adams and Pittsfield to help take out that asbestos or lead paint or whatever the impediments might be, so people could get their house, a new roof or insulation or whatever.
Do you have some information?
I do. I can send it.
Okay.
Notes myself.
Can I ask one more question? So there's a column here that says subsidized housing inventory. Can you speak to what that means in terms of the town of Stockbridge already having met its affordable housing units for purposes of 40B? And also, can you talk, and maybe Karen, you can talk to this, where you have under 3, partner with developers on privately owned properties. And I think there was just some mention that you don't have anybody in mind at the moment. So how did you get to 7 units? And where does the 28 come from with respect to making suitable public property?
So the next page.
Well, let me just start by saying, and we're going to get to the plan in a moment, and it has some numbers in it too. I don't think any of us are wedded to those numbers. And so that's part of the discussion we need to have. When we get to the next slide, and then I'll let you go through it.
I want to comment on the first part of her.
Pardon?
I want to comment on the first part of the question.
Okay.
Too.
And there's also, so one of the requirements in submitting a housing production plan to the state at this point, even if you have gone through and met the 10% threshold,
Which this town has done.
which we have done. It requires that you identify in your strategy over the next 5 years, 0.5% of the housing inventory that you would add in the subsidized housing category, correct?
0.5% of the year-round housing stock.
Yes. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the year-round housing stock is about 811. So 0.5% of that would be about 4 units.
Five
Five
units.
units a year, because you have to round up. So, so that's why some of these numbers will look to be in the range of 25. But how one arrives at the 25, I think there's a lot of discussion we haven't had yet, we need to have. And look at a plan that would see, set that as an objective, but, it's not set in stone even.
I just want to make a comment on the 13%. I think you're feeling that maybe we've met our affordable housing needs, and why should we be aggressively looking for more? Is that what I'm catching from you, or?
No, I would reframe it to say that the town has met a state mandate.
Okay.
However, this is a plan that facilitates additional housing opportunities based on the needs of the town.
Right.
Right.
There are numbers in here though. So if you approve a plan that has numbers, then that's an objective that you are seeking to accomplish.
Right. Well, let me just say on the 13%, a good chunk of those are senior housing, so not available to middle-aged, middle-income, younger families. 22 of the units are over at Riverbrook for developmentally disabled women. So the number of actual units that are family-oriented is about 30 at Pinewoods. So while we met the 10% threshold, the way it's defined by the state, we're seeing that in our population changes and our income changes, that there's a huge unmet need for affordable housing by other people. And we see a lot of strugglers, people paying over 30 and 50% of their income for their housing. So we're trying to address that need as opposed to just playing a numbers game with the state limits.
And
Right, go ahead.
One other
Can we
thing.
just back into it a different way? So number 2 says, make suitable public property available for affordable housing, including donated property. I'm assuming the donated property we're talking about is on Glendale Middle Road. And my assumption also, and I don't want to, keep going here because I know that's not really the purpose to talk specifically, but it seems to me that someone has done work to, in spite of the trust having to select an engineer, but as members of the public, it's been represented to us, that work hasn't been done. So therefore, I'm trying to understand where this number comes from, because if you haven't done your due diligence with respect to the donated property, why would it be included in here? Or the question is, it is included in here.
Are you? So let me just say something.
Yeah,
So these numbers came from Karen.
Blame me.
Okay, I get it.
So, and I will just say that this is, as I mentioned before, the donated property you're referring to would be in this category, but there are other properties that also might be in that category. And it is absolutely the case that there's been no conversation whatsoever about how many units, even if we could build there, which is not known until that's done. So this is not a reference to how many units would be on that property. This is saying.
Have there been other properties that have been donated to the town for affordable housing potentially?
No, but we just started asking. Yeah, we have looked at other properties. For example, on Route 7 for 30 years, there's been an abandoned property, used to be the Berkshire Theater Group housing, called the Levan property, also called the Beaupre property. It's basically a rotting mansion and 10 or 12 acres of land, and it's right on the bus route, and it's very suitable. And it would it could be cottageous, or it could be mixed use. Many of us are saddened when we all know folks, if you've been here for a while, who age out of their house and move to Kemble Farm if they're rich, or to senior housing in Pittsfield or Springfield if they're not, or North Adams or whatever. I would like to see more units at Heaton Court. Those are all rental units. There's places up there you could build right around Heaton Court. How about if maybe some of them were market and some of them were subsidized so that you didn't have to be poor to end up to be able to stay in your hometown? You know, my sense is there's a lot of things that we can do here, and it is not like we're just, you know, focused on any one property. This is still at the brainstorm level, yes.
But knowing the elderly population in town, why wouldn't you start with Heaton Court? Why wouldn't you know there's land available? Wouldn't that be like a? Why
choose?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I presented this idea to the Stockbridge Housing Authority, which is the Heaton Court manager 2 months ago. I followed up with Andrea last week to say, what do we need to do to get them to vote, to look at it? We told them that we would help them find funding for the study, the whatever if it's possible study, whatever those are called.
Survey.
What?
Survey?
No, there's a study you have to do, is it realistic? Looking at it. I mean, looking specifically, there's land that was in a trust for 3 trees that died. These were champion trees next to it. And there's also that road above Heaton Court that basically is old Prospect Hill Road. This is basically a dirt road. It's basically a remnant road. You can expand either up or to the left there. So, yeah, we have started to have conversations, but like anything, decision-making in a town like this is consensus. We can't dictate to Stockbridge Housing Authority what they're going to do. They're going to go through their own process to figure out whether or not they want to do that. Some people.
And we do know there is a long waiting list.
Yeah.
At Heaton Court.
1,700.
Yeah.
1,700 people.
What is the 28 reflective of, though? I mean, to Teresa's point about prioritizing need, senior housing is a need. Mm-hmm. You have a parcel that could facilitate additional senior housing.
Yeah.
Why not prioritize it? And
well, that would be in here.
It's in here.
okay.
I mean, that would be in the 28.
Yeah.
So, okay.
If we did.
Yeah.
So is there, in terms of the backup materials to get to these numbers which we're trying to achieve?
I think we should fill this number in last after we've done all the other work. Because I can tell you, a lot of this is driven by, in 5 years, we would have to do 25 units. It's aspirational. The state won't accept the plan unless we put in the plug number 25. It is aspirational, all right? But the fact is that whether we can get, like in tiny little Stockbridge with 7 volunteers, 25 new units in 5 years remains to be seen. But if we don't put in 25, the plan doesn't get approved. So we'll figure out where it's coming from, but it's not like there's a secret plan to,
Right. So let me move on to.
Will the state have a report approving this plan?
Yes.
Yeah, it's from the planning board, the select board, and the state.
Yeah. So let me go to the current housing production plan as it was originally drafted. And before we get, and I don't want to focus so much on the numbers, what this is spelling out is to add 35 units over the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. We're required only to do 25, so this may end up in a final draft being 25. We'll see. But I think one of the more important than the actual numbers here at the moment is what are the areas that we're looking at to develop and doing what. And so there are really 3 or 4 things and that I want to highlight in here. And then there's also a discussion about whether to look or focus more on rental properties versus home ownership properties. And maybe, Karen, you could go through some of the reasons to focus more on rental than on home ownership.
Yeah, I mean, one big reason is that almost all financing programs and subsidies are targeted to rentals as opposed to ownership. So the town can take, for example, its limited CPA money or actual land and can leverage that with a whole array of resources from the state or federal government. So you can develop on a somewhat bigger scale, you can get to lower income tiers. And so that's one reason. Another, if you do use 40B, all the units in that rental development count towards this subsidized housing inventory, as opposed just to the actual units in a home ownership program. Rental units turn over more frequently than ownership, so they tend to have more beneficiaries over time. I mean, those are some examples of, and also because the housing stock here is so focused on single-family detached homes, to be able to provide some housing diversity makes some sense, more housing choices. So that's, I mean, those are just some that the plan will, lists more. So we're talking about at least putting more of a focus on rentals as opposed to home ownership, where the home ownership would be financed primarily by, if you have any of the market units actually cross-subsidizing the affordable ones, CPA can be used, but with such high housing values, land values rather, in order to get down to an affordable purchase price, you're talking about substantial subsidies.
I want to counter that though.
Yeah.
Everything Karen said is absolutely right, and she's the consultant who's not from Stockbridge, all right? Stockbridge, we're working on a couple other things. See, we can't, the home ownership, let's say we could buy a Mazda house for 500 grand. And let's say that you only could afford a $250,000 mortgage based on your income. I'm not pointing at anyone specific, all right? We got to come up with 250 grand plus put in the pipes. The roads and the pipes to get to that house. But, so the alternative is, you put in 100,000 from CPC and you get $1 million from the state and you get $1 million from the federal government and you can build $2 million in housing. That's the rental idea, all right? My aspirational goal, and I don't know if we can pull it off, but my goal is this. You look at a ticket tax and you look at the residential inclusionary bylaw, which we already got on the books. We already got that on the books. And if this 1% transfer fee that Lee Davis down in Great Barrington is pushing, that would have only impacted 15 homes last year and would have generated $800,000 that could go towards those subsidies. I want to figure out every single way we can come up with the money locally to do the kind of like missing middle income, housing that would actually help people build families here. But she talks, Karen talks about, you get to turn it over more. I don't want turnover. I want you to move here when you get married or whatever. We got single parent with 2 little kids. I want you to stay here till the kids graduate college. This is the way Stockbridge has always been, is we've had like families and families and families, and we're losing that. So how about we don't write off just yet that we can't figure out a way to creatively finance the harder thing to do, which is the home ownership model. For me, I know we need to do the rental model up at Heaton Court, because if you're 75 years old selling your house, you're not going to buy a condo. That makes a lot of sense to do rentals for senior housing. All right. But for young people housing, I'm not so sure. For young people housing, and this is my counter to you.
We're talking about a mix though in the plan as it is.
Yeah. But you put the home ownership stuff in year 4, and I want that right up there in year 1. I want to focus on the home. If we see some of the revenue come in from some of the sources that can make that realistic, I don't want to wait till year 4 for home ownership.
And I think we also heard in the community housing workshop an interest in pursuing some of the home ownership aspect of things. So I think the question here is really more of what's the right mix of, between, because it's probably not going to be 100% rental or 100%.
No, you wouldn't want it to be
So
100%.
The question is really that we want to pursue a mix. And as you said, it's aspirational what we're talking about. So the question is really the timing, but also kind of the relative mix between rental and that at this point. And it will change over time because we don't have concrete projects or plans at the moment.
Well, this is kind of a philosophical discussion about the rental versus the ownership. And, some of the things you're talking about for revenue, Patrick, aren't going to be available in year 1. So, I mean, the idea of, we don't have anybody putting a 20-unit thing in that's going to pay into the system. We don't have the ticket tax money. Well, it hasn't been announced, or we don't know about it. And so maybe that means the ownership part goes a little further down the line when we have a source of funding available, just a thought. And also I think Karen's plan suggests a mix of 80% rental and 20% ownership, as I recall from reading it.
Right.
Maybe the mix is different, maybe this group says, no, wait,
Changed, yeah.
50-50. I mean, you're suggesting something
Yeah.
as a consultant.
Yeah.
But I think it does point out that in rental housing, the entry point is easier, that coming up with a down payment for a house is really a lot, as opposed to getting into a rental. The rental units might be smaller, so less expensive to build than a single family home. There are some real benefits to going the rental route. Although I really appreciate, like Habitat for Humanity is into ownership because they want to help people build equity, which I think is great. But I look at us as being the affordable housing trust to create affordable housing, not to create equity and wealth for people. If they can do it, that's great. But I think our mandate is units, housing, get people into houses. And down the road, I think the ownership thing works when the funding is secured. But in the meantime, the fact is most of the subsidies that are going to be available in the next few years to us are directed towards rental housing. That seems to be what I learned from your report. I learned a lot from your report. So I started out thinking more equity, but as I learned more, I felt like maybe we won't get too many units done that way. So,
But
If
53
I
years.
could just, Jan,
Yes.
just to add, there is a move afoot federally to try to move the tax credit to open up the tax credits to home ownership. And so there's been some bills introduced, and there's some of our legislatures. I don't know if our Congress will ever do anything, but let's assume there will be a brighter day after 2024. There are people on a national level having the same discussion and focus very much on how we can support more for sale versus rental.
I think what I'm hearing is that we probably in the plan want to have, again, to identify both ownership and rental, and maybe to have some work underway even immediately to see what the options are going down both of those roads.
I would frame it a different way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing like a tiny house overlay district or a tiny house only for public housing that was specifically for really young folks in a 300 or 400 square foot house. So they could, and maybe those are rentals, and you got 20 or 30 of them just so you could have like more young people living in town. And then the other side of the, if you look at the life as a sandwich, young and old do rental, where you've got, senior housing expanding at Heaton Court that's rental. And in that middle, I'm all in on home ownership. I want local, long-term, stable families who can build a little bit of, you say build equity, but it takes 15 or 20 years before you can resell your house flip it for a profit. These are deed restricted. So, if someone wants to spend 20 years and they can flip their house and make some money, great. For that 20 years, we've had no more attrition. There's half the people in grade right now in Stockbridge. When I was a kid, and I'm old, I'm 61. When I was a kid, there was 350 kids from Stockbridge in this school district. Today, there's 107, and there's only 31 in 1 through 6, and like 65 in 7 through 12. The rest from their kindergarten. All right, we're still losing kids here, guys. And so we should try to figure out ways to have nice, stable populations of people at all ages. And I don't know, look at, these are just our best ideas I have to figure out. If someone has better ideas, I'm all ears. But, I don't think we're looking for sort of in that middle age group. Like, I don't want to train. I want people to have long-term deep ties to the community. Just like, look at the people in the room who I knew,
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yes.
When we first came to the first meeting and Mr. Morris was on the screen, and he said that he would like to have houses that blend in with what's there in the community already. We don't have duplexes, we don't have rental houses, we're single family owned houses. So to be thinking to put rental houses and multi-unit houses behind us isn't what we were told was, excuse me, what was told it was gonna be there in the first place. So is that what you guys are thinking, that you're gonna be putting rental people back there?
I don't think we agree yet. I don't think we agree yet. You know, I first talked to Hans about that property a couple of years ago. He actually hired at his own cost. He hired an engineer and an architect, and he came up with a little cul-de-sac in one area up in the back with 6 houses in it, six single-family houses. I don't know if that's a good enough. I don't know if that's the plan that we'll end up not going with. I don't know. I think that there's going to have to be some trade-offs and some discussions. You know, none of us speak for the board as a whole, but until we know we can build there, if we can build, we can even start to discuss what the trade-offs and what the things are. You know, I hear the suggestion of what, you know, modest scale. And it's certainly no decision has been made that would be either anything more outside the realm of what you're thinking. Just saying.
Okay. And
Another point. Back in '88, before Hans bought the property, Swan had it. Swan proposed 12 houses back there. At the time that he proposed it to the town, he had no legal right-of-way to get back there. None. Nobody has had a deeded right-of-way back there until my mother-in-law sold a right-of-way to get back there to Swan. 57 acres at one end of the property.
57 feet.
57 feet. And 55 at the other end. Now, we've heard that Hans has got 80 feet.
I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry. We were very clear. We are not in any position to just.
you just went mute.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, I'm sorry, but we really want to have this discussion with the proper amount of information. None of this plan was prepared with any reference whatsoever to the property on Middle Glendale. So if we could go back, we've got to preserve the time to go through this plan. It's very, very important. So we're very open to hearing from the neighborhood and the concerns. But right now, I want to stay on what this plan is going to say. And this plan has nothing to do whatsoever with
We get to the specific one.
Yeah.
The Glendale property. So thank you for your comments, but we've really got to move on. Jan?
Yeah. So I think on this last part, the important thing is to whether we want to be identifying more than 25 units or just the 25 that we really have to be identifying. I would argue to maybe stay with the 25. That doesn't preclude doing more if we find a situation that would allow us to do more, but it also meets the requirement. I think it's also important in here to have some initial indication of what the balance between rental and homeownership might look like, regardless of what year it is, but just of the 25, maybe, as you said, half of it be rental and half at this point.
Philosophically, we have to decide, you know.
And do some homework in terms of what are the options going forward. Mm-hmm. But I'd be interested in knowing what everybody's thoughts are on those two pieces of whether we should or not. And then the third thing is there are really 3 or 4 things that we're talking about how we would accomplish those housing goals. One would be to develop property that's privately owned with a developer. One would be to develop something that's on town-owned land.
When you say that, is that town that we owned before May, when if we come into ownership with Alfonso's property, or
It would
is it other town-owned land? Because I don't think we really identified any.
other
Town-owned.
town-owned land.
I mean, did we? I don't know. Yeah, no.
We didn't identify Heaton Court because of the roadway.
That's not, oh, yeah, that's true. Right, Heaton Court, oh, that's right. Okay, good. Okay, so that's the town-owned land. Right, good.
And I think at this point, we don't need to be more specific about which property,
Okay.
because we don't know in many cases.
We don't have to
So-
be more specific, no.
So is there anything else, Karen, that you think we need to make sure is in this?
No, I just suggest anybody who, read through it, and if they're having comments, to get back to us, and we can adjust. I'm hearing today that a greater interest in maybe 50% rental and ownership, which we can, change in the housing needs assessment. I guess I'm hearing in general these, basic kind of approaches you guys feel comfortable with including in this package of strategies for review.
Right.
With some of the nuances that you've added during this discussion, which I will add into the draft.
Okay.
For my part, I would say, first, let's stick with the 25 number and not greater than that. I think we're going to have a great deal of trouble meeting that. And I would also think we should, if we can not allocate by year or by type.
Yeah, can't do that.
Pardon?
Can't do that. They want to see by year the production goals by strategy.
Just divided by 5 for each category.
Yeah, you really want to get a plan. Are we here to actually plan or to comply? I mean, that's,
But honestly, though, Jackie makes a good point that when a plug number 20 is in there,
Where to come
where to come from? In my perfect world, we would build 15 units at Heaton Court, and we'd build 2 Habitat for Humanity houses and 6 or 8 houses behind these guys for a single family. That's 25. We're done. All right. I'm just saying, we can get to 25 in a whole bunch of ways, but somebody may say, well, we should do something at Beaupre or.
And we make it really clear in the draft that these are just estimates at this time. Best guesses, I think, is the term at this time. There'll be great fluidity likely as the years go by. So, and there are no demerits for not making any of this.
Yes.
This is just supposed to be a plan that the town has that says, given our resources, given the regulations, given what we've heard throughout the process, this is what we think makes sense as far as a proactive approach for the town to better bolster affordable housing.
Can I just say one thing about the benefits to the town of doing this plan, as I understand it? If the town doesn't do this plan, review of proposals, and you can tell me if this is fair, you have more of a heavy-handed state approach than if the town had not met its requirements, then the state would have a much more heavy-handed approach to what development could occur. It could override zoning, for example. With this plan in place, and I'm trying to understand it myself, but with this plan in place, this gives the town greater flexibility with respect to its say about its future. Is that fair?
Yeah.
We don't really need, look at communities that are required to do housing production plans are below 10%. This is a voluntary exercise on our part to try to have this exact conversation we're having. We're under no obligation to even do this plan. If the select board and the planning board say, we don't want to submit it, it's done in the water anyway, because they have to approve it before it goes to the state. But I want to just make one comment on that 10% thing, all right? Stockbridge is a little weird town demographically. Lee, 92% of the residents of the homes in Lee are owned by primary residents, people who can vote. That number is about 40 to 45% in Stockbridge, if that. So what that means is that even though we have 1,638 homes, and even though we think at best count, we have no way to know for sure that 800 of those homes are owned by people who live here more than 6 months a day a year, so can vote here. That's the number that 10% comes out of. So in other words, we don't have anywhere near 10% of the houses in this town as affordable to people who, need affordable housing. What we have is 10% of our census population homes, which is less than half of the homes that are here overall. So I always hold off before, taking a victory lap as a town saying, oh yeah, you met your goal. We met our goal because Tanglewood is up the street and we got the bowl. We're a very attractive town for folks into the cultural stuff and whatever. And because we've got a much, much higher population of part-time residents than many in most surrounding towns even have. Great Bear, Stockbridge is like 70% primary residents. Lee, 92%. Even Lenox is 60%. We're like 40% for lucky, 45% for lucky. So that's how you get to that. That's how 113 is 10% of 1,600 houses. Because it's not,
Well, backing into that number 25, is the town required every year to, as it grows, which presumably it will, is the town required to then provide affordable housing commensurate with the state requirements?
We are at 10%. We're under no requirement to do anything with housing. We are at 10%.
So going forward,
we're going to do what we want to do as a town.
And what's needed in the town.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's the people decide, it's like, yeah.
So
There are some additional benefits that come with submitting a housing production plan, though, in the state, discretionary money, that kind of thing. There's some, other things that could benefit the town by doing that.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Do we know why the demographics are so vastly different here in Stockbridge from the other surrounding towns? It's interesting to me that this community, and you said, I think Monterey has been affected.
So basically Monterey is known as the movie star second homeowner town. So if you're really famous, you buy in Monterey. All right.
Okay.
Stockbridge is basically the cultural enthusiast, secondary homeowner town. If you want to be able to walk to Tanglewood or hear from your beach house, that's why houses on the bowl go for $2, $3, $4, $5 million a piece, right? It is. This is what it is. I'm not criticizing it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. As a guy with the guy in the back row does the budget for the town, it's pretty nice to have a whole bunch of homes that are budget that are priced at $5 million because it makes the rest of our taxes pretty low. So, I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying that geography has a lot to do with it. Look at my dad died 10 years ago. My brother and sister and I inherited his house. And when he died, I was living in Boston at the time, and we decided to list it. We couldn't even get $300,000 for that house. We put a new roof on, and this crazy real estate market we're in now, that house is across from Tanglewood in Stockbridge, by the way, and is worth like $800,000 or $900,000 now. Regular people couldn't. I'm glad my house is worth a lot more than it was 10 years ago, but people can't afford to buy it anymore. That's what we face. The market has made the prices crazy. So we're just trying to figure out how we kind of make sure that it's not bad that you're a retiree, or not bad that you hit the Bitcoin, jackpot, but maybe it just shouldn't just be those people. Maybe we need the mix that we've always had of all sorts of people.
Okay, so I would like to see if we could go around with the trust members and get your take on how whether you think the mix of the things that we're saying we would pursue is right, and whether we should kind of keep it to the 25 or do more, or the rental home ownership, what's the right balance that you would argue, so that we can figure out how we want to modify this going forward.
Keep to 25, and no more than 25.
Could I mention something just before we go? There might be, the state is now discussing rounding up on figures. Now we've been able to, so if you do the calculations, the production goal was 5.4%. Now we're in the situation we can decide to round up or round down. There's a discretion the towns have. The state's now looking at insisting that there be rounding up. So there's a potential for going up to 6 units. All we have to do basically in the plan is say that if there is any change in the policy that we will comply. But just to, it might actually go up to more than 25. I'm sorry.
There's no,
Yeah,
if
for
we
now.
don't do them,
There's nothing right now we have.
okay.
Okay, so you would say,
Let's keep it at 25.
and.
I missed the last part of this discussion, so I want to hear some more. Maybe Patrick can weigh in.
I like that, keep it at 25. Let's overperform, not set ourselves up to fail.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and rental versus homeownership?
I think that we should focus on rentals for elderly, maybe micro houses, small tiny houses for like teenagers, people who, graduate from high school or college and want to be able to stay here. And I think that all the missing middle should be home ownership. I would go, let's try to do 12 of those houses as helping people get in and raise a family here, and 12 of them for seniors to stay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Mark?
I would definitely not go above the 25. I think we should put the minimum in because I think it's very ambitious as it is. And the mix, I'm thinking, do we have to put a mix in, a percentage of one or the other? Is that a requirement, Karen? That we have to commit ourselves to that? I sort of feel like I'd like to look at this as more, what are the opportunities that come before you and what is appropriate for that particular site?
Yeah.
So if the Levan property became available, we might approach it differently
For sure.
than we might the Hans's property, or single houses here and there that we pick off one way or another. It's almost like, why wed ourselves to percentages before we know what things are available and what we might pursue? I don't know if we can
I think we could,
put it in there and say that we will have a mix of the housing to be determined by the availability of the land and the interest in development.
yeah, I think we could get away with being
A little
more
fudge.
ambiguous. Usually there's kind of a general sense of, where the town's going to focus with the development.
Well, it's a small town with relatively few things that are going to be developed in the next 5 years. And
I mean, we could.
I think being able to be flexible.
Yeah, we can put it out there, and if the state says we need a little bit more definition, comes back, we can take it up then.
Yeah, this is Bruce. I agree with Mark. I think we should set the floor at 25, but with the caveat that he basically just described, which is, but we may go up depending upon what becomes available to us.
Okay. And Randy?
I can concur with Patrick, but I lean more toward a higher percentage of home ownership. I think that's really the most appropriate thing for our town. And while I agree that younger people and older people might find rental to be attractive, I think the biggest need in our town right now is home ownership.
Yeah, if we get a green light, I agree with you, Randy. If we get a green light from Heaton Court to look at adding some units there, they've got to be rental. It's a state housing project. That's the caveat. If we get that, the rental percentage is higher. Otherwise, I completely agree with you. I'd rather see home ownership.
Okay.
And Michaela, is Michaela still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
We haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I would say I agree in terms of the home ownership. I would also just want to say, as a person who, I'm 41, and I know a lot of my friends don't necessarily want huge. I mean, if they want a single family, they don't want a huge one because, I'm not going to lie, the electric bills here are astronomical. So I just want to say that because I do think that tiny homes should be something considered to rent, but also to consider to purchase.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people want to live, some people I know want to live really simply, and they don't want to have a lot of stuff, and they don't want to have a lot of overhead. And, so I just think that's something to consider, rentals and homeownership wise.
Okay.
That also means they'll stay. If, you're not going to go from rental to rental, you've got a reason to stay. And it gives you a foot. I mean, why are we still here? Because our parents bought a house.
We've included as models in the plan, there's you're calling it tiny homes, sometimes referred to bungalows or cottage style housing. in pockets, and we included a models for both rental and ownership, beautifully designed projects in Martha's Vineyard. It's just, with just as examples.
There's a lot of co-housing stuff going on now that's sort of, an interesting mix of seemingly different types too.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up unless anyone has anything else they want to,
For the housing production
for the
plan?
housing production plan.
And did we have any, how about, I'll send you my comments that I had I went through and commented on the whole 130 pages. So.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, and then, we don't have to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yes, okay, good. All right, well.
Okay, anything anyone else wants to?
What do you guys think, listening to that? I know you haven't been in on all the meetings. I mean, just curious. Yeah.
Hi there. I just thought your comment about, well, you were saying about how Stockbridge is attractive because of the bowl, because of Tanglewood, all of that good stuff. And I'm sure nobody would want to lose that feeling of the town in terms of any of the needs going forward for affordable housing, in terms of like what Kofi said or some other people said about the kinds of structures in which you yourself said ideas such as putting two-family on 3 acres or whatever, those kind of adjustments where people would drive through and maybe even wouldn't even know that it was affordable housing or how many people lived there. And it seemed to me that that would be a way to approach it. It was a long time before I realized that the houses on Main Street was apartments, you know what I mean? I don't think I knew that for years. So, I mean, with that kind of a model, I think it will be a way to go forward with the needs for the younger people to come, but without having, ticky-tacky houses and little clusters and were totally not conducive to the feeling that everybody has grown up with. That would be my opinion.
And I would agree, housing typology is really important in terms of maintaining neighborhood character. I also think that it's encouraging that that the town is undertaking this. I also think, though, that there are many of us who may not be as familiar with the issues or the recommendations. And so I would just, as the town goes forward with a series of hearings or meetings or whatever, I would suggest that you also have illustrations. So if we're throwing around terms like cluster housing, perhaps an illustration of what that means in this context is fine to, talk about Martha's Vineyard or whatever. But this is a very distinct community and a very special community for those of us who aren't born here.
Yeah.
But I do think as part of, you have in here, you want to educate the public. I think part of the education of the public is to have some visuals that really you can tell what you're really talking about. Because often, for those of us who've been in the field, we use language that folks may not understand. And so part of that is, part of the education is, let's show, that things become, either they become less fearful or get angrier. But at any rate, I think it's important to at least show visually, some of these
Good
suggestions that are in here as we go forward.
Okay, thank you.
I just briefly want to say, I grew up in this community. I've been here my whole life, basically. And, I love it here. I love the community. I love the town. But as somebody in a younger demographic, the town doesn't really provide much for people in my demographic. There's not affordable daycare, let's say. There's not a grocery store. There's not somewhere I can get affordable lunch. There's not a hardware store. There's nothing that I think would bring people who are younger, if they could have a choice between I could get the affordable housing or the rental in Great Barrington or Stockbridge, I think most people would choose somewhere else. I'm not saying that that means nothing should be done. I'm just kind of bringing up how I think many people in my demographic would feel about that. I don't know if it's a build and they will come and like that infrastructure comes after people are here, but there isn't a lot for.
Music Inn was open. We had midnight movie showings when I was like 8. Well, I know you're older than this, but when I was 18, you could go to Music Inn at midnight for the midnight showing. And I don't think that anything is open past 10 here now, or maybe 11.
I totally agree with that. And my husband and I talk about it all the time. That like if there was like a lovely, beautiful beer garden downtown, it would be a great way to get people here. And I have a lot of friends in our age and demographic who have kids, and I see at play groups, and they say the same thing. They're like, we never go into Stockbridge because there's not really anywhere to go.
Yeah, we used to have play groups. We had all those things when my kids were growing up.
And the playground behind Town Hall is actually really popular. There's a couple of play groups that work there because it's one of the nicest playgrounds.
There are definitely play groups. I'm talking more about like there's nowhere, like we don't necessarily. We might go to Michael's, but we would love another option. You know what I mean? Like right now there's like 2 places, sorry.
We need a pizza place.
And Home Depot.
No, we need a pizza place, desperately.
All right.
I just wanted to make.
That was a good.
No, I think it's a good point.
Be right.
That was a good point.
About it, kind of wanted to.
No, but it's going to be.
Let people stay open later, I would support.
Right,
Yeah,
but it'd
just
be
like-
interesting to see if we could put together something that says, this is what we need in town to bring younger people back. I would love your input on that, because if we had that, if you do it, they will come. I mean, my kids are probably.
If you do a master planning process, these are the kinds of things that would be really important to kind of put out there and try to figure out.
Maybe as a group of older people too, we remember what it was like. And maybe we can help. So there are a lot of things.
All right, I don't want to lose everybody because we do have about 3 or 4 other agenda items I'd like to get through before 5 o'clock. First of all, Patrick, before you disappear, can we talk about the CPA funds?
It's my understanding. Thanks, Karen. Bye.
Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much.
No problem, see you later.
Okay.
So,
Randy, I have a board meeting I have to get off for.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I have an Integritas, formerly Berkshire Healthcare System board meeting I have to get off for.
Okay, so we're gonna lose you.
bye, Bruce.
Bye, Bruce.
Thank you for coming though.
See you, Bruce.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Patrick, fill us in.
Still have a call.
It's my understanding that that of the 3 existing properties,
Pinewoods?
River, by 5 o'clock, I started losing my mind. I was a lot sharper at 3. Riverbrook, I think it's going to put in for a modest replacement on a chimney. I think as a try, at least I personally will support it. I think that's a valid project. I believe that Stockbridge Housing Authority is going to do some additional work around the foundation to finish the project that they began funding in with over the last 2 years from CPC. And I believe that that Pinewoods feels that they have a crisis with their boilers. They're 7 or 8 years past their expiration date. And, and we've seen, just it was in the paper a few weeks ago where they had this problem with one of the developments in Great Barrington where 10 people were without heat for a few weeks. And I think it's going to be a high priority to probably try to figure out at least some way to support that effort. I feel like CPC has an extra lot of additional resources this year. I think that we should encourage them to leave some of it undesignated so that as some of our ideas get fleshed out over the next year, we can come back to them. I don't believe any of the ideas that we've talked about today are at the point where we are ready to request funding. And I frankly don't think that the CPC sees anything ready enough, defined enough in terms of a project to fund them. But I can't speak for the CPC or for this board. That's just my recommendation.
So,
Patrick, do you think we should appear before them and at least tell them what we're working on and what our expectations are in the next couple of years?
I don't think we need to. I think everybody knows, certainly people on the boards like CPC know what we're doing. I don't think CPC's CPC's works by people apply. They go through prioritize, figure out which ones are going to fund and not fund, and determine of the overall pool, which is usually $300,000, and this year's $1.1 million. How much of it to put toward those applications and how much to leave undesignated for future years? I think that's their process. They don't need. They know that everyone reads the paper. They know that Hans donated some land and we're going to be coming back next year. And, I certainly will make the case from the panel as to why we should leave some of the money undesignated.
Okay, I know, Liz, you're joining the board, the CPC board this year.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we have a voice to say that if they give away all the 1.1 million this year, if that's the choice they make, we don't have a well to go back to.
Yeah.
So we're not asking for anything? Or are we asking for some undesignated funds?
Well, undesignated simply means that it just stays in the pot for future use. That's why of the 1.18 million we have this year, approximately 325,000 is from the current year tax receipts and the state, and the other 800,000 is undesignated. So not all of it. I mean, it's complicated, but basically 800,000 is from previous money. So we're just saying leave some of that previous money still previous money and don't necessarily assign all of it for now.
So Patrick, are you suggesting that there's be a suggestion about how much to leave undesignated or just?
Yeah. No. I mean, I think that it's hard to know what to suggest in the absence of knowing what is being requested. I don't know how bad the boiler system is at Pine Woods. I know I don't want people to go cold. I don't know what the historic preservation projects are going to be. I don't know if anybody's going to come forward and say there's this unbelievably great piece of land we should conserve for the open space bucket. We need to buy this one tract of 100 acres because it's got like the only, polar bear in Berkshire County on it. I don't know what. I'm just saying that until you see the pool of applicants, you can't know how to make the determination of, it's too soon to tell, but everyone's going to know that we've got something coming. And basically my guess is you're looking at least 100 to 200,000 subsidy needed for a house we want to build, if we want to do the home ownership. So if they reserve 200,000, they could subsidize a house. If they have 400,000, 2 houses, 600,000, 3 houses. That's kind of how I see it. It's sort of, we're going to have to come up with other funding sources too, but the math isn't that complicated here.
Do we want to ask for some undesignated fund to go into our fund? All of the, I know you did. I'm keeping that going.
Thank you.
When we had our meeting of all of the affordable housing trusts in Berkshire County, all of them said their principal source of funding was from the CPC. The state guide that goes out about affordable housing trusts and big thick booklet on this says CPC funding is a principal source of funding for housing trusts. One of the problems I think with the CPC arrangement is that, Santa Claus only comes once a year. And you really have.
He only has coal in Stockbridge.
Yeah, right. And if you come up with an idea in the spring that's ready to have some action in the fall, and you're like, well, see, we don't get to the CPC until next March. It's like we're not necessarily operating on the same timetable that they are. Whereas if we could get some money thrown into our pot, we might have the flexibility to move on something if the opportunity arose.
See, the reality though is Lennox, for example, has a $37 million municipal budget. Lennox is like much bigger than us. They've got like, shopping malls and, apartment buildings or whatever. Stockbridge is an $11 million budget. CPC gets 3% of the budget, basically, tax receipts. A little bit less than that because not all the money comes from taxes. So in Stockbridge, the CPC, the total pot is only 300,000. In Lennox, it's almost $1 million. So when they went to do those houses on Houstonic Street, they can ask for a big bucket of money because it doesn't cost any less to build a house here as it costs to build in Great Barrington or Lennox, but because they're much bigger towns than us, getting kind of a project off the ground with CPC money is more realistic. I don't think going forward we're going to get more than $100,000 a year from the CPC, and it costs even modular, $400,000 or $500,000 to build a house. If we don't come up with other ways to creatively fund this stuff, we're not going to be doing a lot of housing in the absence of some big giant state subsidy or whatever. And with state subsidies, you can't preference locals who might be the exact kind of folks who you want to kind of make sure that they have a place in their own community to be able to, I feel like, ask, don't ask. I mean, if some of the money gets left undesignated and we have a good project, we'll get some of it next year, I would think. I don't see why it has to be put into our bucket. And that's, and that's.
Because you might have to buy, say you're looking at a house that comes on the market. Where's the money that we're going to put with the down payment or the whatever, something that we could rehab?
But we can't do down payment assistance with CPC,
right.
though.
I'm talking about us
buying the property.
Buying the property.
We won't have the resources to acquire.
Doing the project, we're so restricted with such a limited amount of money. I don't know, Patrick, you have your good reasons for not wanting to ask for money now. But it just seems like we have 225,000. One of the things that shouldn't be lost sight of is that last year they gave Construct $220,000 to do the driveway, and none of that money's been spent. As far as I understand, the cost to do what's left is about 50. So there's another $150,000 hanging loose there. Maybe that money could go to help the boilers.
Yeah, but they don't get access to the money until they turn in receipts for the work being done. So if the job came in under budget, that is not CPC money that's spent, and we will claw it back. That's why there's so much money, because, Michael's staff, was able to go through 20 years of appropriations and see what hadn't all been spent. That's why there's so much money in CPC, because, these guys.
You should take some credit, Patrick, for that.
I did a little bit of it too, but I'm saying, I said, Ray, can you do this? And Ray did it. And then I said, Erica, how are we doing on this? And Erica did it. So I had 5 minutes of the work, and those guys had 10 hours of work. And I want to give them the credit because 10 is more than 5. So I'm just saying, you're right. So, but if you find, look at what you just said about, let's just have at least enough money so that if there's a house we want to buy, we have the resources to put down a hefty, payment on it, whatever. That's a good CPC proposal, and say, realistically, after we pay for the 21E and whatever we're going to put into the playground or whatever, we're going to have 175,000 left, and we'd like to have 300,000 just in case. If you want it, that's like a reasonable CPC proposal. It's a specific project that I think is a lot better chance of getting funded than we don't think 175 is enough, we want 3. It's arbitrary. They're going to view it as arbitrary. I know these guys. I just think
Also write it that way.
Well, I'm not, I got so much on my plate. I'd be happy to edit with anybody out here who wants to work with it. It's only 400 words. It is not writing a book. It's like it's a graphic novel, so, but come up with something specific and we can certainly do it, but.
Mark, are you up? I'll happily work with you.
Yeah, I just think I think our CPC likes things to be very specific. They're used to getting proposals for very specific things. And the idea of approving something that's very vague and just out there as to maybe someday, I don't think they'll do.
I don't think this is that unspecific. I think it's rather specific that, I'm looking for a house and I don't know exactly which one it is, but when it comes up, I want to be able to put that down payment down. That's how real estate works. Yeah. I can't plan that house is going to become available, and when it does, I'm ready.
We can't, it becomes available. We have to in 6 months they're having another meeting. We'll talk to them then.
But if we're going to do that, then we should say, if that's our plan though, then we should make sure we have all the paperwork in place for the deed restriction. We're not going to have any time also to have a month for a lawyer to write the deed restriction, all the other things. If you want to be all in on kind of, we want to have a little kitty for that house that comes up and to try to acquire it and deed restrict it and turn around and mortgage it at some percentage of what we have to pay, because it's a good deal. We had a guy, I won't say on what road, but someone called us up 2 or 3 years ago and the trust wasn't in place yet, but he said, I'll sell you the house for half of what it's worth. It was worth $800,000. We could have got it for $400,000. If we put $100,000 in, someone who could afford a $300,000 mortgage would be living in a gorgeous house, over in the center of town, not downtown, in the Interlaken area. and we just weren't able to execute because we didn't have a trust yet. Those kind of opportunities do come up. Sometimes people are just like, I'll sell it to you for less. But that means that we also want to make sure that we have all of the parts in place so that when we need to pull the trigger on that, we can say, okay, this is what the deed restriction looks like, and we have a banking relationship to get the down payment assistance. You know, like, I think that's a great idea, but there's 3 or 4 parts to it. None of it's hard that we have to have in place to actually be able to do it.
In the past, they have given us, last year they gave us 25,000, and in previous years they gave us 200,000. And thank goodness we at least have that seed money to do this work right now, to do this engineering and to get prepared to have this land, this gift, assuming it works out. And that we'll have, you know, $180,000 left when our little projects that we're trying are done. And we're going to need more. I don't. Why not ask? If they turn us down again, they turn us down. And ask that money be reserved for undesignated, because we have this possible gift that's coming our way that we're going to need a lot more money for.
I could write up something to add to your, if you'll give me
I think that
100 words or your 400 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we write it up around the opportunity specifically with that home I was just talking about, where there are people do come around who are willing to sell at a discount, and we should be ready to take advantage of it. I think that would be a good, reasonable proposal that, you know, is specific to the point to being specific. So I'm putting that on the list.
Okay.
But just to go back, it looks like Riverbrook might ask for 20 to 30, and Heaton Court the same, 20 or 30.
Yeah. I think it's in the 5 figures. I don't know what fixing foundations and chimneys look like. Those were those 2 projects.
5 figures.
What?
5 is what you're saying?
No, I said I don't know. 5 figures, not 5 figures. It's in the tens of thousands. I don't know what that's. You know.
Okay. And then construct is, you think is maybe 50?
No,
Construct?
don't know.
I don't think we have any idea, but I think they've got 16 or 32 boilers that need to be replaced. And it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of what their need is, whether or not, you know, I don't know what they'll ask for.
Okay. It gives a sense of what else in our category will be at least requested. Is that it on that?
Yep.
Excuse me. Oh, I'm so sorry. In terms of the Pinewoods playground and garden, we do have permission from the Botanical Garden to work with us on the building the garden, and Green Acres is also expressed interest. So the pieces are coming together. We need to work with Construct. Did you? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Not a word, not a word.
So we need to get an agreement for all the parties, and we need to get a cost. Also on the playground equipment, we need to get a cost for clearing. I have a preliminary cost for clearing the land, and once we have the final numbers, we're going to probably have to appropriate up to $5,000 additional contribution.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves before we hear from Construct.
Right. But in other words, just so you're aware of where things are. And that is, other than to report that the CBDG request for $1.3 million in federal funds is underway. And Patrick, I assume the letters from the town went in. I sent everybody a copy that I sent in.
Did you want me to do it, or are you doing it?
No, not for you got to do it for the selectmen and whatever else, the other city departments. I've done the one for the trust.
All letters have been submitted, were submitted probably about a month ago.
Oh, okay, good. Excellent.
Okay, that's terrific. Okay. Anyway, I talked to Cassie today, and there's this fantastic woman. There's more to do on our part, which we'll talk about it in another meeting. And Mark has very nicely agreed to help. We need to really go to work to find people in our town who can apply for these funds, assuming we get them. And I learned a lot about what the process is. And the rules are, out of the 1.3, 1.1 is going to get dispersed to the 3 communities. And each community is required to get $100,000. So we never got our $100,000 from the Dalton. And if I heard Michael's voice there, maybe he could tell us if he thinks he were ever going to get it. But it's also first come, first serve. So if there's 22 projects to be funded. And if we put in 22 projects and we got all the applications in first, it wouldn't happen. But it's set up that way. Whoever gets all their applications in gets the money. Except you have to get 100,000. We have to get at least $100,000, and that's approximately 2 projects. But we can have more if we have more people and we get the applications in. So, Michael, are you still there?
Yep.
Do you think we're ever going to get any money from the Berkshire Planning?
That grant is closed out.
Yeah, there's no money there.
Okay, so we're not going to get anything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we don't want to be in a position to not get anything from this one. So they will protect us up to $100,000, but we can help more people if we help them apply. And they're going to work through the Council on Aging to try to get it to identify people. And Mark had a lot of good ideas. And we also have a list of 50. And Liz, I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but once we get this information of 50 houses that have been identified in our community that need repairs, we need to go through and see if they're owned by full-time residents.
And Randy, I'll just add that my wife, Nancy, who's on here, is interested in helping to coordinate any efforts to reach out to people to locate candidates who could, get these grants and really get the word out even before we have a definite approval, so that once we get approval, we can move quickly. Nancy actually met with Michael today for a few minutes about this. So you've got a volunteer available to work on it aside.
We have a very talented volunteer. Nancy, thank you very much for that offer. It's really, we need to put our shoulder to the wheel, because last time no one applied in Stockbridge.
That's not really true.
No.
That's not really true, Randy. People did apply.
Okay. All right. That's the word I got. That's what I was told. But no one was selected.
That's
true. That's true.
Is this one a copy for us?
There's Michael.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add for any of the subjects that are on the agenda? All right. Next meeting.
I'm sorry, did you announce who will be selected to do the due diligence on Morris Land?
No.
It's on the agenda? Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's Foresight had the low bid.
Motion to accept the low bidder.
Right.
So, do we need a motion to do that, or Michael, can you just accept the low bidder?
No, I can, but a motion would be better.
All right, I make a motion. Motion to accept the low bidder, Foresight.
Second.
Okay, second.
Roll call. Patrick, aye.
Liz, aye.
Mark, aye.
Dan, aye.
Randy, aye. Michaela?
Michaela, aye.
So that's 6. Good.
I know the vote's over, but just for the reference for the audience, this group has been highly recommended by Lennox uses Foresight to do this kind of work, and other communities as well. And so.
Including Stockbridge. We use them on many projects. We know that.
3 companies.
You may see them tromping around your neighborhood at some point, going back to look things over.
Right, they're very, very good. One question is, Michael, one thing we didn't put in the proposal, but since there's so much conversation about how wide the strip is that is along Middle Glendale Road, it seems we should ask them to survey that and verify exactly how much land.
We can't ask the RFP is written, Randy. They're going to do the work that we hired them to do.
I know that.
It only costs a couple $100 to hire a surveyor, you know. Is that in the RP?
It wasn't to look at the front way, but you are allowed to do up to 20% adjustments on a project, so as an add-on.
All right.
There are some way if it is small enough to ask them to do
All right,
that.
good.
It's not a high ticket thing, but I think it would be a very good piece of information for us to have when we evaluate everything. Anyway, so Michael, you could go forward and get that started, right?
They'll be contracted tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, what are we going to meet next?
How many weeks away do you want to meet? I guess is the question.
What's the next thing? Patrick, will there be work with CPC that we need to vote on or review?
I think we've authorized everybody to submit something related to the one we talked about. I think we should go to the first week in March.
Okay. Anybody else have any other views? We might have to have, we do have to get this resolved about the playground and the garden. And so depending on when we get the written information from Construct, we may have to have a short-term meeting, I mean, a very quick meeting to approve any extras, because we really need to get this playground equipment ordered in order to get it. We have an installation date on the first week in May. So we need to get it ordered or else we'll lose that date.
So Monday, March 4th?
Okay, does that work, Jan?
Yes, that's fine.
It's good for me.
3 or 4 o'clock?
I think do people like earlier?
No, this is better because the other people can come.
What, 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Monday, March the 4th, 4 p.m. Is that good?
Yep.
That's it. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Very, very productive.